The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, Steve Milazzo, welcome to The Journey, and I'm glad you were able to join us this morning. And so let me just mention a little bit about what The Journey is about. And The Journey is just having normal conversation, just talking about how in a person's life, just ordinary people, how they may have had either some type of setback, either because of addiction, mental illness, changing career, something happening along that lines. And then what did they learn from that? What things have come up when that happened in their lives? And then now what have they done as a result of going through that setback? Mm-hmm. And so that's essentially what we do on The Journey. And I know your sister-in-law. I've known Karen for a long time. She's a great, definitely one of my star therapists that worked for me at KP. So and she talks extremely.
We'll have to play this back to her.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this would be like a birthday present for her. and then she has this great fondness for these two little ones that you have. So
three.
Oh, three now. Yes,
infant now too. So yeah,
I haven't heard as much about that one, but the two boys I have heard a ton about. So Steve, if you could just maybe mention a little bit about your backstory and who you are, but maybe before we jump into that, what does Steve do for fun when you have an opportunity to have fun? I know with three young ones and just a young family in general, and I know you're busy with work and everything. What do you do for fun?
Well, if I'm not changing a diaper or doing anything with the kids, I like to spend time on the water in the summer. And it's since I have three boys, all under 5 or 5 and under, it's a lot of things kind of center around them. So sledding and all that fun stuff. We try to get a babysitter once in a while and go out and have some fun. But
sure. Okay. So just a little bit about your backstory. First, your wife's name is
Amanda.
Amanda. Okay. And then you have 3 boys. Your oldest is 5. Is that right?
Yep.
And his name is
Lucas.
Okay. Yeah. And then the next one,
Joshua.
And how old is Joshua?
He's 3.5.
Okay. All right. And then your youngest, the newborn.
Yeah, he's almost 1, so he's going to be 1 next
already.
month.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And his name is
Micah.
Okay. And so you grew up where? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Park Ridge. Okay. It's pretty much right on the border of the city by O'Hare Airport.
Yep.
Pretty much grew up the entire time there until I moved out, went to college, and then Amanda and I lived in Des Plaines, which is a suburb over there, for about 4.5 years, and then we moved out here to Winnebago about 3 years ago.
Okay. And how did you and Amanda meet?
In college. Okay. So we met at NIU.
Okay. And
I think it was actually the same apartment complex that her parents met at, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. So, she was my neighbor. I think she lived above me, and then they kind of switched apartments a couple times. But she was my neighbor. Okay. I think she was probably banging on the ceiling because we were too loud. My roommate was a DJ, so he would practice.
Gotcha.
And that would kind of make the neighbors, some of them, not too happy.
Sure. And you, what did you study at NIU?
Business.
Okay. All right. Now, when you were at Park Ridge, when you were in high school, any extracurriculars? Did you any sports or any clubs or activities or anything like that?
Yeah. As soon as I always was a worker, so as soon as I think I applied for a work permit at 14, I always wanted to do something. So I was working, since 15, 16, and it was the best job ever. I can remember I did a little retail, but then I was a lifeguard. That was the best job of my life so far.
Sure.
I mean, it was amazing. You got a tan and you just sat there. I think I still remember it. You would be on in the chair 40 hours of every hour and then off 20 minutes. So if you could do 12, 13 hours a row. It was amazing. So
sure. Okay.
yeah, so I did that. I remember that like a lot in high school. I did it's funny, Mando always makes fun of me. I did tennis for sport. My friends were all they did wrestling a lot, so I actually did some of the conditioning with them because I liked working out. But then I just never committed to anything because I was got to work.
Okay. So now, did you play tennis for the school, or did you just play for fun? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was for the school team. So.
Okay, gotcha. We a few episodes ago we had an individual who came on who also played tennis, but then went on and played at the collegiate level, Division I level. And
so
turned
it's
pro
real
for
good.
Yeah. So it was a pretty in his case that was his world, and that was a pretty intense element for Rob. So
yeah, my body type changed, so it wasn't the best tennis anymore.
Sure.
Transition to football.
There you go. Sure. So then, Mom, now you have a twin, and a twin brother, and identical twins, right?
Yep.
And then any other siblings?
Yep, and a younger brother as well, Mark. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yep. And then your twin brother's name is
Nick.
Okay. So it's you and Nick are the oldest, and then Mark. And then how old is what's the age span between Mark and you?
Very close. I think it's 18 months apart, so a year and a half. Yeah.
Oh, so there was the three of you guys were pretty.
Oh yeah,
pretty
right.
close. Okay. And then what did Mom and Dad? Did they work? Did Mom work outside the home? What did Dad do?
So my mom was a nurse, and then she pretty much, with the three kids, was able to stay home. My dad worked in construction he was an engineer, and worked for the same company for about must have been over 30 years. So he recently is kind of transitioning into semi-retirement. He'll do like a couple jobs here and there, but
okay. Gotcha.
Getting into that stage of life.
Sure. Okay. So tell us a little bit. I know part of your story was that your brother, your twin brother, has struggled with some mental illness, and so. But before we jump into that, I'm just curious what is it like to be a twin? I have a younger brother, and I've had friends that have been twins, and I have friends of our family have triplets, and so.
Wow.
Yeah. Two girls and a boy, but obviously in this case they're not. They're all fraternal twins, and so so what was it like growing up being a twin / identical twin?
Yeah, it was something else, and I think I forgot who brought it up, but it was some research where we're identical mirror image twins. So it's kind of weird. They say if you fold your hands like this, one will have this thumb and the other hand will have this over it, and if my right eye is a little bad, it would be his left eye. So
that's called a mirror image.
It's called a mirror image identical twin. So apparently that's even more rare. So I guess to lead up to the question, it's kind of funny because growing up we were friends with like I don't want to swear, I shit you not. We were friends with three other identical twins.
Really?
I remember this growing up. I thought it was kind of strange, but I don't know. People would joke all the time. They're like, "Oh, can you switch classrooms?" And your teacher wouldn't know, and we never did anything like that. But it's something. I mean, you pretty much have. It's a kind of clone of yourself, no matter what you do. So, growing up, I never really felt, completely alone, or other kids have to do things by themselves. I always have my brother with me, and then my other brother too. So, I guess I don't know. That would be the main thing, because you view the world differently because you have this twin brother. So it's like a lot of times you do things together and kind of figure things out, and then kind of tell the other one. And I think I was kind of the more dominant twin growing up, so I would kind of do something and kind of help him out, and that was kind of the relationship growing up. And where they used to always joke about, I used to always have I was the one having the bad ideas, or I don't know. He would follow along.
So you would have the ideas that may have been outside the lines, and
yeah, he was the more cautious one, very cautious. Not like cautious, afraid. I was kind of more like not thinking about that aspect or that anxiety, like just kind of go and do it and
more
have fun. Hey, relax, like you're, more adventurous. So.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of times I've talked to other individuals who've been twins, and there's a lot of times where parents will do certain things and do the cute things and dress everybody the same and do all those types of things. What do you, now being a parent of three and in close proximity, what things do you remember growing up with your mom and dad? How were they raising twins? I mean, I don't know if that's the right question, but
yeah, no, I know what you mean, because for sure, you see those families with twins or triplets, and they probably have all matching clothes and things like that. I can't think. We all had our own. Growing up, it was funny that had the 90s neon colors that are probably came back and already went out of style already. I don't know, but I was always like the neon orange. My brother Nick was the neon green, and then my other brother Mark, I think he was either purple or yellow. I can't remember. But so in that aspect, I don't think we wore a lot of the same clothes. And then again, I don't know though. We were probably little. We probably had some of the matching ones. I don't know if it was a thing where you said like. The little shirts with the arrows on it, like I'm with,
oh, sure.
So and so, and I don't know. I think when just growing up, my parents treated us all kind of individualized. I don't know. You get like more comments from other people, like people at school, like, oh, if I punch him in the shoulder as hard as I can, like, will you feel it, or do you guys have ESP and all that stuff? Being on the family front, we just saw I was Steve, Nick was Nick, Mark was Mark. So
okay, interesting. And so, and I know we'll probably come back to this idea about the mirrored twins that may have revealed itself more as time goes on. Some of it's the small stuff, right? If you hold your hands one way, he just naturally folds his hands the other way, or just like you were maybe more adventurous, he was more cautious. And I imagine there was a lot of that element that we would just say, oh, that was just Nick. He was just that way, or that's just Steve. But if there is that element that there's a mirroring going on back and forth, that's could even guide some things even more, as give us a better template of how things may unfold. But and one of the things that I hear a lot about with twins is that maybe it's out of survival sake for the parents or whatever, that in this case it would be the boy, struggle with trying to find their own identity. And anything that you remember about that, or maybe being more the dominant?
That is interesting that you bring that up, because growing up I was always agitated. I was like, oh, why is he following me doing everything? And kind of, if you fast forward time a little bit, it kind of falls into place, and a lot of things kind of make sense. But I think he definitely struggled to find identity, because he's if he was growing up, he was definitely, I think, in my shadow a lot of the times. I can remember he did have his own group of friends, and I can't remember how this was, like middle school or younger than that. But when we got into high school and things like that, that's where I kind of noticed it a lot more, where he was just kind of he stopped having his own group of friends, and he's my twin brother, so he comes with me, and he would kind of even my friends at the time it's Nick, right? It's Steve's brother. So, he can tag along. And I would kind of get, and to tell you the truth, I got frustrated because when it was time to go to college, even I had family members say, oh, well, make sure you go to the same college as Nick, so you can help him. And, he's attached to you and, you can room with him and do all of that. And to be honest with you, like, I was like, I knew that we had to kind of grow up by ourselves, and at the time I was annoyed because I felt like, because we did go to NIU together freshman year, and we did room together, and it was a time in my life where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Like, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna work out when I want to do, and then I felt like he should do the same, and I would find him kind of, quote unquote, copying me, kind of, I laugh. It's like my 5 and 3-year-old fight all the time, and it's like, no, stop doing this, I'm doing it. And maybe it was some aspect of that in college where I kind of wanted to break away, and he was still kind of hanging on. So that makes a whole lot of sense with the identity, for sure, I think. Sure.
And I know just my own experience, when I went away to school, and I went to 2 years at a community college and then went away. And even though I had done a lot of things and traveled a lot and done a lot of different aspects, that moving away and discovering new friends and creating your own outside of your own growing up space, it was intimidating. And even though I had a lot of experience with that in other avenues, there was always that home base. And so it was different. So I imagine, not any different for yourself, but then you had, if Nick was there with you and you were the more adventurous one, it's probably a little bit different for you. Maybe it was a little bit like you were being held back. And
I felt like I was, yeah.
And so, and that's a normal thing, right? I mean, you're 18 years old, and that's a pretty normal, natural thing that this has been your whole entire life, even pre-birth, and so it'd be pretty normal to say, or feel that way. I would think that would be a pretty natural. And there is a lot of individuals that I know that have had that similar experience as twins or triplets. And so kind of fast forward now to during the time period that Nick struggled. I mean, he had already, there'd been a little bit. He maybe wasn't as outgoing as you, anyways. But now you're starting to see some things different, even different than you saw in middle school and high school. And what were some things that you saw different?
Yeah. So, and everyone kind of has their own time frame in which to accept, things that are going on and kind of process it themselves. But, I first started noticing it in high school. The junior, senior year of high school, it was clearly something was wrong, but everyone would kind of chalk it up to, he's a teenager, he's angry, he's listening to music in his room, let him work it out. And in some aspect, I thought that was the same thing too. And that's kind of why I was excited to go to college, because I felt like if he had the opportunity to meet new people, get out of his shell, like that's to me, that's the first step in growing up and making your own decisions and things like that. So I thought that would be like a positive aspect about it. But I first started noticing some major different, being the whole mirror image twin idea, where it's like, I don't have ESP, but I could pretty much, think what, him, growing up, sleeping in the same room, bunk beds, you know what's going on, like in the person's mind. So you when you notice a disconnect, I'm going to notice it first, right? Besides anyone else. So I did, and I voiced my concerns, and I think, it was kind of swept under the rug because, people don't want to think, oh, there's something seriously wrong with my 17-year-old, So, the thought was, go to college, you have Steve there with you, and progress. So that happened, I dormed with him, so he was my roommate for the first year. I think it was either first year or first semester. I think it was the first year. I can't remember, but that's when he started really struggling in school. It's not like the kid. He tries so much. He took the same entrance test as I did and scored the same. The score I did, which, and he wasn't copying off, he did it by himself because, but, at that point, and to be honest with you, this time period is mostly a blur because that's pretty much when, everything, shit hit the fan. Speaking, I mean, it did. It was like, is this really happening? Like, what's wrong with Nick? I started noticing that he stopped taking showers completely. And, I'm a freshman in college. I want to have fun. I'm not going to think about this, adult stuff that we're talking about now. Like, I'm going to drink and have fun and, girls and things like that. Like, I didn't want to worry about, there's something seriously wrong with my,
And really, other than you didn't know. I mean, he's acting now dramatically different than before.
Really, yeah. I mean, it got to the point where, he wouldn't shower for multiple days, and then I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. And then with everything surrounding it, the grades, and then just, I would get the idea, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna feel great, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna have a talk with him, I'm gonna get through to him, so to speak. And I tried that, I can't tell you how many times, but in your mind, you're like, you think that you can do it, right? You can just make someone change or get better. But, as time went on, realize that, this is going to be something that he, needs to figure out by himself. And that's when he moved back home with mom and dad. And then he started going to a community college. And, my family didn't really understand his grades, right? Because they thought he was kind of doing it on purpose, right? So, I mean, it was the point I remember my dad forced him to sign a contract with him. And, because we're using the tools that we have in our toolbox to fix the problem. And if that's all we know, there's nothing seriously wrong with this kid. He's just needs to try harder. He's being lazy, something like that. And this is around the time frame where I started saying, like, listen, there's something seriously wrong. When I started, talking to him, it would be like you weren't even talking to your twin brother anymore. It was someone else, and
And when you say that, so obviously there's certain observational behavior things. In this case, not happening, right? So there's isolation, not taking showers, the poor hygiene.
Yeah.
I'm guessing not going to class.
The sad part is he would, I think he would still go, and the teachers would be horrible, mean to him, and why are you even trying anymore? Like, you're failing, and I felt bad. It was sad.
So he would go to class, but he just wasn't able to process the content.
Right.
Gotcha.
And, that was probably the last thing, that he would, if he's not perceptive to learning, I mean, he's struggling to, wake up.
So I'm just thinking to myself of how such a difficult time period for this to be happening, because he's, for the first time himself, he's going away. That part of him that's probably having all these self-doubts about, is he able to make the cut, going from a high school student to a college student anyways? And now, unbeknownst to him, learning has now became extremely difficult because of how his brain's processing information. And he probably doesn't know. Is he, during this time period, is he articulating anything to you? Is he talking to you about what is happening in his thinking?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough to remember, honestly, like the transition, because I mean, it's It's tough because it's not like a switch is flipped. I mean, you kind of see the signs in retrospect. So you look and you're like, oh, wow, this makes a whole lot of sense. Like all this stuff was happening.
In hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight. Yeah. But when it's actually happening, you're still trying to do everything you can. Like, listen, I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to get through to him. He's just having, it's depression or something like that. Yep. And he's going to, magically get better. And he's going to, for lack of a better term, pull his head out of his ass and start doing well in school. And everything's he's going to get a girlfriend and everything's going to be good, right? I mean, that's what we want.
Well, and in some ways, that, my guess, has been your role with him throughout your guys' life. That you could have those talks with him. You could pull him through when he had self-doubts or he was a little bit gun-shy about doing something. That was in a lot of ways, that was the role that you played with him. So why wouldn't you think this was going to be any different? So for you, did he finish? He stayed there all the first semester. Did he stay for the second semester too?
Yeah. So he stayed the second semester, and then, to be completely honest, like, it was kind of almost a relief that he did move back home, because I was able to move in with an apartment with a friend, and I was actually, started my college experience. Right. While at the same time I knew that he was, safe and at home. And I think he actually did start doing, getting some good grades and some, so I think he did start getting good grades again. And I think he, got a girlfriend or something, was being social, was talking to people, had friends. And, so in my mind, I'm like, okay, he's going to be okay, right? Yeah. He's going to be good. And I forgot what else he was doing, if he started a job or something as well. But in my mind, I'm like, all right, like this is the end of the whole scary phase, or whatever it is. And little do we know, it didn't even really start yet. But so, in college this is happening, and to be completely honest, his state, since I was absent, I didn't really see what progressed from freshman year to senior year. And then really, I graduated college, I moved back, and I stayed home for 6 months. I was actually saving up for an engagement ring for my wife now, Amanda. And so I lived at home for 6 months, and I was working full time, and I just save, and bought the ring. But that's when it started noticing everything. I'm like, listen, guys, like, there's something seriously wrong. But it was hard for him because he has to voluntarily do it himself, right? So unless it's, involuntary inpatient or whatever it is. So, when he finally got diagnosed, this was like after I graduated college. I mean, it's like 2009, I think it was. So, in my opinion, he probably should have been diagnosed years prior. But, that's when they started him. It was horrible. I mean, we had to take him. It was kind of similar, my grandmother, when we had to put her in a nursing home. It was a similar situation, and I don't even think I was there that day that my parents dropped him off. Saying, how can you do this to me, and all this,
So that was what Nick was saying to them.
Yeah, I mean, it must be horrible for a parent or family. I mean, but it needed to be done, and
So they were bringing him to a hospital, or was he going to counseling at that point? Or
the thing was, like, no one would see him for whatever reason, unless it was like really like suicide attempt or something like that. And really the only reason he got an appointment with the psychiatrist that he did was because my cousin worked at a behavioral health, like a big name medical group, and was able to get him in. And And, that's when I'm telling him, I'm like, listen, he's talking about hallucinations, glowing numbers on the wall. Like, this is when my anxiety started really flaring up, and like, there's something really wrong.
So he was then sharing those experiences that he was having. Okay. So was he sharing them with other people besides you, or just sharing?
Honestly, I think I was the first person he told, and I went to my parents and I said, listen,
something more is going on than just depression.
Right.
And not that is sometimes isn't severe.
But I mean,
but when you're starting
he needed medication.
Yeah. So he goes in, and at that point, because he's older, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, when someone's older, then they're only being seen. They're the only ones sitting in front of the in this case, psychiatrist or a therapist or counselor or whatever. So sometimes they don't always share everything. So there's limitations there. But at that point, was he diagnosed at that point, or?
Yeah. So they started him right away. He was in must have been inpatient. It was real dramatic for me to see him in there with no shoelaces or belt, and and then. Yeah, it's okay. It was traumatic. You gotta laugh sometimes, right? But I remember. It's funny because I play piano. I guess I should have said in the beginning. So some of the things that we've done as a kid, all three of us play piano since first grade. I used to wake up and practice piano 6 a.m. in the morning, kind of set my tone for the rest of the day. I kind of wish I should do that now, but the babies are sleeping, so can't really do that anymore. But when I was actually in the place, and I guess they bring in like a counselor and a doctor, and they like kind of talk to the family, and because they have to educate us. They had to educate us and to look for certain things and things like that. But they also kind of wanted to share the news, like his diagnosis was schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, whatever the diagnosed term is initially. And I didn't say anything, and there was a piano in the room, and I just went over and started playing the piano. Yeah, my cousin's like, "Yeah, you didn't say anything. You just started playing the piano." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." So I dealt with it, but yeah, it's funny. I usually don't. I'm a gabber, as Amanda will say, or my Karen's mother-in-law. She's talking about some kind of thing in Ireland that if you touch, you have the gift of gab or something. She's like, "Oh, you don't need that." Yeah. I usually ramble and talk about God knows what, but yeah. So when all that was happening, that was about 10 years ago now.
Okay. So and again, just to help you articulate what that feeling was when you heard that, you already knew something was going on,
right?
And maybe even at a deeper level because of your connection to Nick. Now there's a diagnosis. Now there's a label, and I say label more from a standpoint in this particular case of okay, so now we know there's something actually going on, but there was not in this case. There's not relief. There is something happened. What was the loss that happened at that point?
Yeah, and we'd have conversations about this. At that point, I pretty much. It's hard because you grieve the loss of a family member because they're never going to be the same again, but yet they're still with us and every day after that point. Yeah. So it's tough. I think the thing, and part of the reason what made me write my initial article that I blasted it out to the world to see, because people would always make these comments to me either at work or they're like, "Oh, you had a perfect life and you perfect family life and all this stuff," and these people have like no idea. And there's a lot of people, and there are millions, and they're in the same situation, and no one knows and no one talks about it, right? Because it's not, there's this, in NAMI they use stigma over and over again, and it's true. And it's just not. It's getting to the point. There's, you're doing amazing stuff. There's people out there that's really taking this to the forefront, being like, hey, listen, like we have to talk about this. Is happening. Like, all these trends are not just, all the trends are not just happening by themselves. It's because so long decades of not paying attention to this kind of stuff and talking about it. And the fact that I didn't feel comfortable by telling anyone, like anyone I worked with, or, just no, like, and, you have these work meetings and they're like, oh, tell us a little bit about yourself. Of course I want to say, oh yeah, my identical twin brother and all this kind of stuff. My little brother, he's, therapist doing this. So, oh, what does your twin do? Avoid that.
Stops.
Because no one wants to talk about that. So,
well, and I think this is what, when you were in that room and you heard the diagnosis for the first time, it now shatters the denial, right? It shatters, we want it to not be what it is, and now it's shattered. The window's now broken, and so now that loss comes in. Now at the same time that's shattered, it also can be the same exact time period where we now know, because we know what it is, then you can start doing something about it.
Right. So that's the positive side of it. Yeah.
So I think it's the combination of that. Not only, I think the hard thing with mental illness is that it's not always visible, right? So you can't actually see it. So if someone is an amputee, they've lost a limb, you can see that. Or if they're blind, or you can see that they don't have their vision. You can see that they have to walk with a prosthetic. I mean, there's a different element, and there's that same grieving that family members do. And then I imagine, again, being his twin, being his identical twin, in the mirroring part, that even adds even more of that connection. One, it allowed you guys to know what now possibly can be done, but it shatters that denial. It shatters that, well, he's just going to grow out of it,
right?
In that element of it. And so, and we'll spend, as humans, we'll spend an extended amount of energy and time trying to stay in that happy
normal
land.
Zone.
that normal line.
Perceived normal zone, because really no one is completely,
And clearly things were going on during that time period. For that 6 to 8 years had already been happening. But now all of a sudden it's brought to light, and I think you're right with what you said. Is that, and I want to hear a little bit more about that part. At first it was, I don't know what to do with this, right? Literally, and you just started playing the piano, so you went to that space where you could just channel those emotions, right? And that makes total sense.
What I did, yeah.
That makes total sense. And then there was, I don't know what to say about this or do with this, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to avoid it. But then you decided that you're going to go public. You're going to go. You're not going to run from anywhere. What made you come to that point?
It's just something in your soul that's like, listen, you have to do this. I'll tell you what. Like, it was a hardest thing. I mean, this, talking right now about it is the hardest thing, but doing it for the first time and doing that article, that was my first step, because I want, it. And one of the things I heard, and was one of the other podcasts, that, the person that I was listening to, she said one of the things that made her feel the best was to help other people, no matter, on top of all things. And that's the same goes for me. I mean, when I posted that LinkedIn article, I had people from across the country message me in the same situation. Oh, my brother, and talking about things. I got an email from another woman. I think it was across the country. That's that's what I'm doing it for. And, the title of it was You're Not Alone, because you feel alone because no one talks about it. And, the way that people talk about, diseases such as schizophrenia and things like that. I mean, it is kind of a scary thing. I mean, they have movies and stuff. I mean, the actual reality is a lot more sad than scary, but, yeah.
Well, and I think there is, because of the fear and because of the stigma, or maybe it's the other way around, because of the stigma, there's fear, and there's a lack of awareness and education about mental illness in general, but even more specifically, what we refer to as certain chronic mental illnesses, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, though even more so with that, and it is just as equally complex. That we talk a lot of times in therapy that it's a three-part approach. The proper medication to help someone be within range to be able to do the counseling and therapy they need to do, because now they have to learn how to do certain things to stay within an optimal living range, and they have to create a lifestyle so that they can do that, because it's a lifestyle as well, and it's hard. It's hard enough to do it when you're not struggling with an illness, but when you're struggling with an illness, because everything about that illness doesn't want you to be functioning, or not functioning in a healthy lifestyle. We've had somebody on here before who talked about that his depression has a vested interest of not letting him go, and because it wants to continue to exist, and so that's why we have to get more and more educated, and the medication helps keeps the symptoms in check, or can keep them in check, but it isn't. And I imagine you've and Nick have experienced that, and your parents have experienced that. Just because the medication was dialed in and worked exactly in the first quarter of the year, everything was good. That doesn't necessarily mean that the same medications are going to work exactly the same way 6 months later.
Yeah, and that's kind of the challenge with the medication piece, is that it's kind of like a dart on a dartboard, finding the right medication, and and people's bodies build up immunities and things like that, and then you start noticing that, just recently, he did find a medication that worked very well in the beginning. He was pretty high functioning. He had a facility that was close by the house that was helping him. That facility got closed down, lack of funding, went downhill after that. Then they had to he switched his medication a couple times, and now he's pretty low functioning. It's a combination of things, like you said. So it's the treatment, the medication, and it's I've been told as a family member too, like sometimes you have to lower your expectations at the same time and just kind of go with it and help the best way you can. But it's nothing's ever going to be, fortunately, I wish there was a magic pill. I wish,
But having spoke to a handful of people over my career, it's that key of trying to find the right medication and helping them learn how to have their own voice, because they have to report what's going on and what's not going on, and those little simple things about keeping a journal, about where you're at, how you're feeling, and so we can go back and look at that. Checklists regarding everything from showering to eating to changing your clothes, making your bed, all those basic things that we and why those are so important is because the things that we can do externally, have that external structure, will allow some of the internal chaos to slow down a little bit. If both are in chaotic form, it's a worse playground, right? And so going back to yourself as a family member, and then it's all those things that you talked about wanting to have your own identity, your own autonomy, all those things, and now knowing a lot more to the story. Not that you would have been able to do anything different, because this mental illness is much bigger than you. There's nothing that you would have been able to say or do. Because it has a life of its own, what has that been like now? Being able, your part is to not only take care of yourself and take care of your family, but to have a voice about it, a voice for other people who are family members.
Yeah, and because I feel, especially, and I feel like now honestly, we're on the brink of some really good stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people are starting to catch on, like, hey, we need to start taking this seriously and putting resources and things like that. But I mean, if I can just reach one person that has gone through something similar right now, and be like, hey, I mean, this is normal. This is normal for me, part of my life, and it's normal if I can, have that. Just knowing that they're not alone, and there's millions of people like that, and they're living with their family members, and fortunately, a lot of the homeless that don't have, the family that's going to do that, because I mean, there's a lot of misconception with that as well. Like, oh, well, wouldn't they be institutionalized or things like that? And the reality is, unless they do like a violent crime or something, they're not institutionalized. So
Correct,
I mean, it's like up to they have to voluntarily, when you're that mentally ill, you don't voluntarily go someplace and say, I need help, right? So it's kind of, it's difficult in that aspect. But, just going through this, the advantages is that it completely changed my whole world, how I view everything. And having worked with, I work in the insurance industry now, and I've worked in HR a little bit, and having, people's personal, everyone has something personally that they might be going through that's tough. It could be anything. And I feel like that, gives me a little more equipped, where I can have those conversations that are similar and kind of provide that kind of compassion, I guess, and help them and have a different perspective than maybe someone else would not have.
So I got another tough question for you.
Yeah,
okay. And part of the reason why I asked this is because I just don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So
good.
So in your case, it's even amplified. Not only are you a family member, but being a twin, but you're a family member, a twin, who doesn't have mental illness. Yeah, you have stuff maybe. It's but you don't have you don't have chemical imbalance. Not only, so I'll have people talk about, why not me?
I mean, I could be hallucinating this whole thing. It could be like Shutter Island.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We all might be, though.
In my own mind, you're interviewing me on this podcast.
But when we're all having the same hallucination, it seems to not be the same.
It's our reality, yeah.
There you go.
We created it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that idea of, regardless if it's survivor guilt or why not me, why did Nick have to deal with these things? Maybe if you could just speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of, that's a huge part of the negative emotion. I feel like everything I do like any kind of milestone that I had in my life, whether it was getting married, having my first son, getting that job that I wanted, or doing stuff like that. Every single time, I've always been sad at first. Like, it's like you said, the survivor guilt, and then it's, you learn to, to be happy in the moment. And obviously I'm not like, my son's born and it's like, oh, it's so horrible. But it's a emotion that I have, and it's involuntary. I don't, mean to have it. But at the same time, it is really sad because, you're born with this individual, and then for whatever reason, he's not allowed to have a quote unquote normal life like you, and it is true. Why am I allowed to have all these things? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that part of it, and why I appreciate you coming on and here talking about it and doing what you can do about it, which is talking about it, because that this is Nick's journey, just like this is Steve's journey, and somewhat of Mark's journey, and so I think the lessons that we can learn from it is how having a greater appreciation for what we do have, because we recognize that there's individuals who don't, grieving it, being able to experience it, and share those things, because that's going to give voice to other individuals. Just the element of because we don't understand, so then we have fear. Well, could it happen to me? Or could it happen to my kids? Could it happen to? And we have this fear, right? And so obviously there's advances in technology and regarding genetics and different things like that we can look into, but I think the biggest thing that we can do is, one, feel those feelings when they come up, recognize them, they're not something to try to push away and make go away, but then give voice to it, because we don't know who's going to be listening to this, and they needed to hear what it was like for you and your experience, and because that may give them permission to know that they're not, that's not strange. I'm not saying that's strange. That
no, I know exactly what you're saying. But it's true. It is true, because in a lot of people, I don't know if it's scary as hell talking about this kind of stuff that you just experience by yourself and in the car maybe, or you think about these things, and it is, but the reality is that there's so many other people that it's affecting. And I haven't figured it out yet, but when I'm trying to, I feel like there is sitting right here right now, it's uncomfortable, but it's a step in the right direction, I feel like. And what you're doing and what other people are doing, I know I want to do more. I don't know what that is yet. I'm figuring it out. All I know is I'm taking it one step at a time. But I feel like, I was listening. There was a period of time where I was commuting an hour and a half each way to work, and there would be, I started off listening to music and things like that, and then it started getting old, and especially when you hit traffic, and then it's up to 2 hours one way. So I'd start, listening to a lot of different kind of podcasts or YouTube videos, not watch it, but listening to. And one thing that stuck with me is it said, the rules that exist today were created by people that were no smarter than you or I. So why are we not doing more to change the status quo than we are? Because we have this false belief, that's how it was for how many years, and everyone turned out okay, right? I mean, is the world okay right now? I don't know. I don't know. So that stuck with me, because I've met some truly remarkable people in my life, and I just being in the same room with them and just watching them, from my perspective, solving the kind of things that they're solving, and I can't help but think, what if they just pointed that towards something else, like mental health or anything? What can be accomplished? I think a lot.
Well, I think it's a big thing to, for yourself to come on and talk about, because mental illness doesn't discriminate.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter about, race. It doesn't matter about economics. It doesn't matter about, parents that were intact parents and did all those things, did all the healthy, normal things. there is a genetic disposition to a lot of mental illness. Now, there is also mental illness that comes as a result of trauma and some experiences in life, and that's a different element, but that's also mental illness as well. But it doesn't discriminate, and I think that's the biggest thing. And for the more that we can talk about it and become educated and listen to these stories and recognize that it is not only hard for the individual that it affects, but it's also hard on the family members and the significant others of the person being affected. And to be able to share those stories, and how do we raise our awareness? How can we help build some bridges instead of putting walls and isolation around people? So, Nick, as we get ready to wrap up today, if there was anything in particular that you would want to leave for someone listening, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So honestly, and like I said earlier, if there's one person that is listening to this and eating it up, and anything that I said would resonate with their own life, that's my goal. But at the same time, I guess as a message is to keep an open mind and try, when you in your daily life, everyone's daily life, they meet I don't know how many people a day, depending on what kind of job you have, or if you're at the store, kind of just keep that open mind and not be quick to judge, like, oh, you see someone, they look weird or something. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, because my brother, for a while, he couldn't go anywhere except for the library, and he ended up getting kicked out of the library because people were reporting that he was staring at them. So it's just a part of our society, but people don't talk about it enough. Or just be aware of it. So that's the biggest message I can, because all of us can change the perception together, but as long as everyone is a little bit more open-minded, a little change in attitude, if everyone just kind of tweaks their attitude just a little bit, I feel like can have a pretty significant impact.
Yeah, I agree. The perception that we have around breast cancer has changed tremendously, or around AIDS has changed tremendously with all the advocacy and all the people coming up and speaking. And I think the mental illness and suicide has the same potential of being able to change the stigma, because even when we talk about suicide, it's never about suicide. It's about what are the things that are leading to someone being in that darkness, and the majority of the time that has to do with some form or some type of mental illness. So, Steve, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for having the courage to be here and having the courage to be vulnerable enough to share your story.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Very much like Steve shared, the struggles and the difficulties of how mental illness can affect individuals. The biggest thing that we can do with that is shatter the silence around that. How do we break that stigma around it? And the biggest thing we can do with that is just being able to talk about it. Become educated, be aware, and just talk about it. Thank you very much for being with us today, and look forward to being with you next week.